The Bordeaux hit my face like a slap from hell itself. $1,200 wine, Drake Torrin always reminded us, as if the price tag made the humiliation more refined. Thanks, Dad. Maybe that'll teach him some respect. Filthy pig. Calla's voice cut through the stunned silence of the New Year's dinner table, her laughter sharp as broken glass. My wife Ember sat frozen, her manicured fingers wrapped around her champagne flute, saying nothing. Always saying nothing when it mattered. The wine dripped from my chin onto my white dress shirt, the one Ember had insisted I wear because we need to make a good impression. On her own family, after 15 years of marriage? I felt my hands grip the chair. The mahogany creaked under the pressure. Every face around Drake's massive dining table stared at me with varying degrees of amusement and contempt. Waiting. They always waited to see how far they could push before I'd snap. But I didn't snap. Not the way they expected. I stood up slowly, pulled out my phone, and made one call. Colonel, it's time. The line picked up on the first ring. Holden? About damn time. I was starting to think you'd grown soft. 6 months of preparation. Execute phase 1 tomorrow morning. I hung up and looked around the table. Drake's weathered face showed the first flicker of uncertainty. Calla's grin faltered. Ember finally met my eyes, and I saw something there I hadn't seen in years. Fear. Who was that? Drake's voice carried that commanding tone he'd perfected over 40 years of bullying contractors and city officials. Insurance, I said, dabbing wine from my face with a linen napkin. Happy New Year, everyone. This was enlightening. I walked out of that mansion knowing I'd never set foot in it again as the family whipping boy. When I came back, it would be to watch it burn. The drive home gave me time to think. 15 years of marriage to Ember Ravell, née Torrin. 15 years of being treated like hired help at family gatherings. 15 years of watching my wife transform from the ambitious woman I'd fallen for into a carbon copy of her manipulative father. But I'd spent the last 6 months preparing for this moment. Every insult, every condescending comment, every time they'd made me feel small, it all led here. My phone buzzed with a text from Colonel. Package delivered. Check your email. I pulled into my driveway, or rather, what I'd thought was my driveway for the past 12 years. The house loomed in the darkness, its windows glowing warm and inviting. A lie, like everything else in my life with the Torrins. Inside, I opened my laptop and found Colonel's email. The subject line read, Happy New Year, brother. The attachments made my hands shake. Not from fear, from rage. 340 GPS pings. Ember's phone, tracked over the past 8 months, showing regular visits to one address, 4247 Mockingbird Lane, Asher Trevan's house. The defense contractor who'd been Drake's business associate for the past 3 years. The timestamps told the story. Every late meeting, every client dinner, every business trip that kept her out past midnight. But the real prize was the second attachment. Property records for our house. The house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 12 years. The house that, according to the county clerk's office, was titled to Torrin Holdings, LLC. Had been for 3 years, ever since Ember had me sign those tax documents that would save us thousands. I'd been paying rent to my father-in-law, living in his house, sleeping in his bed. The third attachment was a financial report. My cybersecurity firm, Ravell Solutions, hadn't just failed because of market conditions. Drake had orchestrated a hostile takeover, feeding my proprietary client data to competitor Zane Marinor. Every contract I'd lost, every client who'd mysteriously jumped ship, it all traced back to information only Ember could have accessed. They'd systematically destroyed my business, stolen my home, and made me pay for the privilege. My phone rang. Ember. Holden, where did you go? Dad wants to apologize. Does he now? You embarrassed him in front of the whole family. That phone call was inappropriate. Inappropriate. I let the word hang in the air. Like visiting Asher Trevan 340 times in 8 months? The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. I don't know what you're talking about. GPS doesn't lie, Ember. Neither do property records, or financial documents. Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Colder. More calculated. We need to talk. Yes, we do, but not tonight. Tonight, I'm going to sit in this house, your father's house, and plan exactly how I'm going to destroy all of you. I hung up and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. The good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the suburban landscape in pristine white. By morning, it would all be dirty slush. Fitting metaphor for my marriage. My laptop chimed with another email, this one from a name I hadn't seen in 5 years. Agent Tessa Hartline, FBI Financial Crimes Division. An old contact from my defense intelligence days. Holden, heard through the grapevine you might have information relevant to an ongoing investigation. Pentagon procurement fraud. Call me. I smiled for the first time in months. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd hoped. 20 years ago, I'd specialized in weapons procurement fraud for defense intelligence. I knew every trick, every loophole, every way contractors skimmed money from government contracts. When I'd first met Drake, I'd noticed irregularities in his Pentagon work. Nothing I could prove without access to his books, but enough red flags to make me curious. 6 months ago, when I'd started planning my revenge, I'd begun investigating those irregularities. What I'd found was a masterpiece of fraud spanning 6 years and $47 million. Drake's company had been billing the Pentagon for armor plating that was never installed. Ghost invoices for materials that existed only on paper. A systematic theft from the American taxpayers that would make him a very wealthy man and a very wanted criminal. I'd documented everything. Every false invoice, every phantom delivery, every forged inspection report. All legally obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests and cross-referenced with public shipping records. The only thing I'd been waiting for was the right moment to pull the trigger. Drake Torrin had just given it to me. I opened a new email to Agent Hartline and began typing. The colonel hadn't changed much in the 5 years since I'd seen him. Same steel gray crew cut, same ramrod posture, same eyes that missed nothing. He sat across from me in the diner booth, methodically working through a stack of pancakes while reviewing the files I'd brought. 47 million, he said without looking up. That's ambitious, even for a piece of work like Drake Torrin. He's been planning this for years. The beauty is in the details. Never too much at once, always spread across multiple contracts, different fiscal years. If I hadn't been specifically looking for it, you'd never have found it. Colonel set down his fork and fixed me with that stare that had terrified enemy combatants across 3 continents. Question is, why wait 6 months to move on this? You could have buried him any time. Because I needed to understand the whole picture. Drake didn't just steal from the Pentagon. He stole my life, my business, my house, my wife. I wanted to make sure when I hit back, I hit everything at once. Colonel nodded approvingly. Shock and awe. I like it. What do you need from me? I slid a manila envelope across the table. GPS trackers. Military grade. I need eyes on 3 locations. Drake's main warehouse, his private office, and Judge Marlow Trasker's house. The family court judge? What's his angle? College roommate. Every custody case and divorce filing in the county goes through Trasker's bench. Drake's been feeding him information, making sure his friends get favorable rulings while his enemies get destroyed. And you can prove this? Not yet, but I will. Colonel pocketed the envelope. Consider it done. What else? I need surveillance on Asher Trevan, a full workup, financial records, travel patterns, business associates, and I need it to look like it's coming from federal law enforcement. Because it will be. Your FBI friend? Agent Hartline's been building a case against Pentagon contractors for 2 years. She just doesn't know Drake's involved yet. And when she finds out? She'll have everything she needs to take him down, all legally obtained, all admissible in court. Colonel grinned. You always were the smartest operator I knew. Most people want revenge. They get emotional, make mistakes. You're treating this like a military campaign. Because that's what it is. Drake declared war on me the day he decided to destroy my business. He just didn't realize I'd fight back. My phone buzzed. Text message from Ember. We need to talk. Tonight. It's important. I showed Colonel the message. He raised an eyebrow. She's scared. Good. Scared people make mistakes. She's also dangerous. Ember's not just Drake's daughter. She's his protege. Everything I know about manipulation and psychological warfare, she learned from watching him. So what's the play? I considered the question while finishing my coffee. Outside the diner window, the morning rush hour was building. Normal people heading to normal jobs, living normal lives. I envied them. I let her think she's in control, let her make her pitch, whatever it is. Meanwhile, you get those trackers in place and start building the surveillance network. And if she tries to run, she won't. Not yet. Ember thinks she's smarter than me. She'll try to manipulate her way out of this before she considers running. Colonel stood and dropped a 20 on the table. I'll have preliminary surveillance reports by tonight. GPS trackers will be active within 48 hours. Colonel? He paused at the edge of the booth. Why are you helping me with this? You could have said no. His expression darkened. Because 15 years ago, Drake Torrin cost me a contract worth $12 million, undercut my bid by feeding information to his competitor. I lost my business, my house, and my first marriage because of that bastard. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to. But I've been waiting for someone with the skills and motivation to take him down properly. You're that someone. After Colonel left, I sat in the diner for another hour, planning my next moves. By the time I got home, I had a strategy that would either destroy the Torrin family completely or land me in federal prison. The house felt different now that I knew the truth about ownership. Every room, every piece of furniture, every improvement I'd made over the years, all of it belonged to Drake. I was a tenant who'd been paying to improve someone else's property, but that also meant I had nothing to lose. I spent the afternoon in my home office reviewing financial records and legal documents. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd imagined. Not only had Drake stolen my business and my house, he'd been systematically isolating me from potential allies and support networks. My old defense intelligence contacts had been told I was unreliable. Former clients had received anonymous tips about security concerns with my background checks. Even my lawyer had been fed false information about my financial stability. It was a masterpiece of character assassination, executed over years with surgical precision. My phone rang at 6 p.m. Ember. I'm coming home. We need to discuss our situation rationally. Our situation? Don't be dramatic, Holden. I know you're upset about last night, but we can work through this. Can we work through your affair with Asher Trevan? A pause. I don't know what you think you know, but 340 GPS pings, 8 months of documented visits, hotel receipts from your business trips that coincide with his travel schedule. Another pause, longer this time. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. We'll discuss this when I get home. She hung up. I checked my watch. If she was coming from Drake's house, I had maybe 20 minutes to prepare. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Evidence Package Alpha. Inside, I organized everything: GPS data, financial records, property documents, Pentagon contracts, and surveillance photos Colonel had taken over the past week. Then I made copies, multiple copies, stored in multiple locations. By the time Ember's BMW pulled into the driveway, I was ready for war. Ember walked into the house like she owned it, which, technically, she did. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floors with military precision, each step calculated for maximum psychological impact. She'd changed from her dinner dress into a sharp business suit, armor for the battle she knew was coming. We need to establish some ground rules, she said without preamble, setting her purse on the kitchen counter. First, you're going to delete whatever surveillance data you think you have. Second, you're going to apologize to my father for your behavior last night. Third, we're going to discuss our marriage like adults. I leaned against the doorframe, studying her. Even now, even knowing everything I knew, part of me could see why I'd fallen for her 15 years ago. Ember Torrin was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, polished, perfect, and completely artificial. Interesting opening position. What do I get in return? You get to keep living in this house. You get to maintain the illusion that you're still married to someone who respects you, and you get to avoid the very public, very messy divorce that will destroy what's left of your reputation. My reputation? She smiled, cold as winter moonlight. Did you really think we haven't been preparing for this conversation? Dad's had investigators looking into your background for months. Your financial troubles, your business failures, your drinking problem. I don't have a drinking problem. You will by the time we're finished. 3 DUI arrests that were mysteriously dropped thanks to Dad's connections. A history of domestic violence complaints that were withdrawn at the last minute. A gambling addiction that explains why you lost your business. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. None of that happened. It will have happened. Documentation is surprisingly easy to create when you know the right people. She moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of white wine, the expensive stuff she kept for special occasions. As she uncorked it, I noticed her hands were steady. Whatever nervousness she might have felt was completely under control. Here's what's going to happen, she continued, pouring herself a glass. You're going to sign divorce papers that give me full custody of Nate, full ownership of this house, and half of whatever assets you have left. In exchange, I won't destroy you completely. And Asher? What about him? Does he factor into your new life plans? For the first time, her composure cracked slightly. Asher is a business associate, nothing more. 340 visits to his house suggest otherwise. You can't prove anything. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photograph. Asher's arm around her waist as they entered the Marriott downtown. The timestamp showed last Tuesday when she'd claimed to be at a client meeting. Actually, I can prove quite a lot. She stared at the photo for a long moment, then set down her wine glass. How long have you known? Does it matter? It matters to me. I considered lying, but decided the truth would hurt more. 8 months, since the first time you came home smelling like his cologne. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe even hurt. But it passed quickly, replaced by the cold calculation I'd grown to recognize. 8 months, and you never said anything. I was gathering evidence. Evidence for what? For this conversation, for the divorce proceedings, for the federal investigation that's about to destroy your father's business. Now I had her attention. She straightened, all pretense of casual conversation abandoned. What federal investigation? The one that's going to uncover $47 million in Pentagon procurement fraud. The one that's going to expose Judge Trasker's corruption. The one that's going to put your father in federal prison for the rest of his natural life. Ember's face went white. She gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles showing through her skin. You're bluffing. I opened my laptop and turned it toward her. The screen displayed a detailed breakdown of Drake's fraudulent contracts, complete with shipping manifests, inspection reports, and financial transfers. Ghost armor plating for vehicles that were never armored, phantom deliveries of materials that exist only on paper, forged inspection certificates for equipment that was never installed. Your father's been stealing from the Pentagon for 6 years. She scrolled through the documents, her expression growing more horrified with each page. How did you get this? Freedom of Information Act requests, public shipping records, cross-referenced financial data. All perfectly legal, all completely admissible in federal court. You can't do this. He's not well. I know. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 8 weeks to live, according to his medical records. Her head snapped up. How do you know that? The same way I know about Judge Trasker's monthly payments from Torrin Holdings. The same way I know about the hostile takeover of my business. The same way I know this house was transferred to your father's LLC 3 years ago without my knowledge or consent. Ember sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the fight suddenly gone out of her. What do you want? I want my life back. My business, my house, my son. I want everyone who participated in destroying me to face the consequences of their actions. And if we cooperate? There is no we, Ember. There hasn't been for a long time. Maybe there never was. She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, scared, human. I never meant for it to go this far. Which part? The affair, the fraud, or the systematic destruction of everything I'd built? Any of it. All of it. She wiped her eyes, smearing her makeup. Dad said it was just business, that you'd never find out about the house. The company? He said it was better this way. Better for who? For the family. For Nate. Dad said you weren't strong enough to provide for us properly, that we needed to take control before you lost everything anyway. So you decided to steal it instead. We decided to protect it. There's a difference. I closed the laptop and sat across from her at the kitchen table. The same table where we'd eaten breakfast for 12 years, where we'd helped Nate with his homework, where we'd planned our future together. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling Agent Hartline at the FBI. I'm giving her everything I have on your father's Pentagon contracts. By tomorrow afternoon, federal agents will be executing search warrants on his offices, his warehouses, and his personal residence. Holden, please, I'm not finished. Judge Trasker will be arrested within 48 hours. The property transfer on this house will be reversed as part of the fraud investigation, and Asher Trevan's defense contracts will be audited so thoroughly he'll be lucky to get a job selling insurance. Ember stared at me across the table. And me? That depends on how cooperative you are with federal investigators. What about Nate? The question hit me harder than I'd expected. My son, our son, was 7 years old. He didn't deserve to watch his grandfather go to prison, his mother face federal charges, his entire world collapse. But he also didn't deserve to grow up thinking this was normal, that fraud and manipulation and betrayal were acceptable ways to treat people. Nate will be fine. He'll live with me, in this house, after the property transfer is reversed. He'll visit you in whatever minimum security facility they send you to. I'm not going to prison. That depends on how much you knew about your father's Pentagon contracts, how much you helped with the hostile takeover of my business, how much you participated in the corruption of Judge Trasker. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her reflection in the dark kitchen window. What if I testify against Dad? What if I help you build the case? Then maybe you avoid federal charges. Maybe you get to remain in Nate's life. Maybe you get to start over somewhere else under a different name with whatever money you can salvage from the wreckage. And us? There is no us. There hasn't been for a long time. She nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that answer. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, Agent Hartline gets everything whether you cooperate or not. Ember stood and collected her purse. At the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, I did love you, once. I know, that's what makes this so much worse. After she'd left, I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, thinking about the man I'd been 15 years ago. Young, ambitious, naive enough to believe that love conquered all. That man was gone now. In his place was someone harder, colder, more calculating. Someone who could destroy an entire family without losing sleep. Someone who had learned from the best teachers possible. My phone buzzed. Text from Colonel. Surveillance package ready. You're going to want to see this. I smiled in the darkness. Phase 2 was about to begin. Colonel's surveillance package arrived at 6 a.m., delivered by a courier who looked like he could bench press a small car. Inside the manila envelope were photographs, audio transcripts, and GPS tracking data that painted a picture of corruption so comprehensive it took my breath away. Judge Marlow Trasker wasn't just taking bribes from Drake. He was taking them from half a dozen other contractors, real estate developers, and business owners throughout the county. His monthly income from consulting fees exceeded his judicial salary by a factor of 10. The photographs showed briefcase exchanges in parking lots, envelope handoffs at restaurants, and wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Trasker had been running the family court like his personal ATM for over a decade, but the real prize was the audio recording from Drake's office. Colonel had managed to plant a listening device during a routine cleaning service visit, and the conversations it captured were pure gold. The Ravell problem needs to be resolved permanently, Drake's voice, gravelly from years of cigars and whiskey. I want him discredited, bankrupt, and isolated. By the time we're finished, no one will believe a word he says. What about Ember? Another voice, Asher Trevan. Ember will do what she's told. She always has. And if Ravell fights back? With what? We own his house, we destroyed his business, and we have Trasker ready to rule against him in any legal proceeding. He's got nothing. A pause, then Drake again. The man's a fool. 20 years in defense intelligence, and he never saw us coming. Some spy he turned out to be. Laughter from both men. I played the recording 3 times, memorizing every word. They'd been so confident, so certain of their superiority, that they'd discussed their conspiracy in detail. It was enough to bury them all. My phone rang. Agent Hartline. Holden, I reviewed the preliminary information you sent. This is substantial. It gets better. Can we meet? This afternoon? Federal Building, downtown? Bring everything. After hanging up, I spent the morning organizing the evidence into a comprehensive package. Financial records, surveillance data, property documents, audio recordings, and photographic evidence. Everything cross-referenced, indexed, and documented according to federal evidentiary standards. By noon, I had assembled a case that would make any prosecutor salivate. My doorbell rang at 1 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw Torrin standing on my front porch, looking uncharacteristically nervous. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Calla, to what do I owe the pleasure? We need to talk. She glanced around nervously, as if expecting surveillance. Can I come in? Depends on what you want to talk about. Dad's in trouble, isn't he? I studied her face. Calla had always been the family princess, spoiled and vicious in equal measure. But today she looked scared. Why would you think that? Because Ember came home crying last night. Because Dad's been on the phone with lawyers all morning. Because federal agents were asking questions at his office yesterday. Maybe you should ask your father about that. I did. He told me to stay out of it. But I'm not stupid, Holden. I know something's happening. I stepped aside and let her enter. She moved to the living room but didn't sit, pacing instead like a caged animal. What do you want, Calla? I want to know what you're planning. I want to know how bad this is going to get. That depends on how deep your family's corruption goes. She stopped pacing and turned to face me. I didn't know about any of it. The Pentagon contracts, the judge, your business, I swear I didn't know. But you participated in the harassment, the humiliation, the systematic destruction of my reputation. I thought it was just family drama. I didn't know Dad was actually breaking the law. Ignorance isn't a defense. I know that. That's why I'm here. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. These are financial records from Dad's personal accounts. Payments to Judge Trasker, transfers to offshore accounts, receipts for cash transactions. Everything. I took the envelope, surprised by its weight. Why are you giving me this? Because I'm 28 years old, and I don't want to spend the next 20 years visiting my father in federal prison, because I have a life to live, and I can't do that if I'm dragged down with him. What about family loyalty? She laughed bitterly. What about it? Dad's been using me as a weapon against you for years, making me say horrible things, encouraging me to be cruel. I thought it was funny at the time, but now I realize he was just using me to hurt you. I opened the envelope and scanned the documents inside. Bank statements, wire transfer records, receipts for cash payments, everything needed to prove the financial side of Drake's corruption. This is very helpful, Calla. But why should I trust you? Because I'm scared. Because I want to make a deal. Because I'm willing to testify against Dad if it means staying out of prison myself. And Ember? Ember made her choice when she started sleeping with Asher. She's on her own. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Calla had always been a skilled liar, but fear had a way of stripping away pretense. What do you want in return? Immunity, a chance to start over somewhere else, maybe witness protection if it comes to that. I can't make those promises, but I can put you in touch with people who can. She nodded eagerly. What do I need to do? Tell the truth, all of it. Every conversation, every meeting, every time you witnessed something illegal or unethical. Even if it implicates Ember? Especially if it implicates Ember. Calla was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. She's my sister. She's also an adult who made her own choices. You can't save her if she doesn't want to be saved. And Dad? Your father is going to federal prison. The only question is for how long? She started crying then, not the manipulative tears I'd seen her use to get her way over the years, but genuine sobs of fear and regret. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know, but intent doesn't matter now. What matters is what you do next. I gave her Agent Hartline's contact information and sent her on her way with instructions to call immediately. Then I added her documents to my evidence package and prepared for the most important meeting of my life. The federal building downtown was a monument to bureaucratic intimidation, 30 stories of concrete and steel designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. I'd been inside dozens of times during my defense intelligence career, but never as a witness in a federal investigation. Agent Hartline met me in the lobby. She looked exactly as I remembered, sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of presence that made guilty people confess without being asked. Holden, you look good for a man whose life has been systematically destroyed. Revenge is excellent motivation for staying in shape. She smiled grimly. Well, let's see what you've brought me. The conference room on the 15th floor was sterile and windowless, designed for serious conversations about serious crimes. I spread my evidence across the table like a general planning a battle. Jesus Christ, Hartline muttered as she reviewed the financial records. $47 million in Pentagon fraud alone. How long has this been going on? 6 years minimum, possibly longer. She moved to the surveillance photographs. Judge Trasker. I've had my eye on him for months, but could never get close enough for evidence. Now you have everything you need. And this audio recording? Obtained legally through private investigation, admissible in federal court. She spent an hour reviewing everything, asking questions, cross-referencing documents. Finally, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me with something approaching respect. This is the most comprehensive fraud case I've seen in 20 years. You've handed me a RICO prosecution on a silver platter. When do you move? Tomorrow morning, simultaneous raids on Drake's offices, warehouses, and residence. Trasker gets arrested at his courthouse. We'll freeze all assets pending investigation. What about Ember and Asher? Depends on their level of cooperation. Your wife might avoid charges if she testifies truthfully. Trevan's probably looking at conspiracy charges regardless. And Calla? The sister? She called an hour ago, wants to make a deal. If her testimony corroborates your evidence, we'll recommend immunity. I gathered up my copies of the documents, leaving the originals with Hartline. There's one more thing you should know. Drake Torrin has terminal cancer. 8 weeks to live, according to his medical records. Hartline's expression hardened. Then we better move fast. I want him in custody before he decides to take a permanent vacation in a non-extradition country. He won't run. He's too arrogant, too convinced he's untouchable. Famous last words. I've seen plenty of criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. Drake's different. He's spent 40 years building his reputation in this community. He'd rather go down fighting than admit defeat. Then he's going to get his wish. As I left the federal building, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not for reconciliation or redemption, but for justice. For the satisfaction of watching corrupt people face the consequences of their actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Ember. Dad wants to see you. Tonight, his house. Come alone. I smiled as I typed my response. Tell him I'll be there. We have a lot to discuss. The final confrontation was about to begin. Drake's mansion looked different in the evening light. Smaller somehow, less imposing. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. The circular driveway that had once intimidated me now seemed pretentious and ridiculous, like everything else about the Torrin family's carefully constructed facade. I parked behind Ember's BMW and Asher's Mercedes. A family meeting, apparently. How touching. The front door opened before I could knock. Calla stood there, her eyes red from crying, her usual arrogance replaced by naked fear. He knows, she whispered as I stepped inside. About the documents, about me talking to you. He knows everything. How? Ember told him. She thought it would buy her some kind of forgiveness. I followed her through the marble foyer toward Drake's study. The house that had once seemed like a palace now felt like a mausoleum, cold, empty, and filled with the ghosts of better times. Drake sat behind his massive oak desk, looking every one of his 68 years. The cancer had aged him rapidly over the past few months, turning his once powerful frame into something fragile and hollow, but his eyes still burned with the same ruthless intelligence that had built his empire. Ember sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk, her posture rigid with tension. Asher stood by the window, trying to project confidence but failing badly. His hands shook as he lit another cigarette. Holden. Drake's voice was weaker than I remembered, but still carried that commanding tone. Sit down. We need to discuss your recent activities. I remained standing. I prefer to stand for surrender ceremonies. A flash of the old anger crossed his face. You think you've won something here. I know I have. By tomorrow morning, federal agents will be executing search warrants on your properties. By tomorrow afternoon, you'll be under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. By next week, you'll be in federal custody awaiting trial. You can't prove anything. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording from his office. His own voice filled the room, discussing the systematic destruction of my life with casual brutality. Actually, I can prove everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Ember stared at me with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. Asher stubbed out his cigarette with trembling fingers. Calla looked like she might faint, but Drake just smiled. You always were smarter than I gave you credit for, he said finally. I underestimated you. That was my mistake. One of many. Perhaps. But you've made mistakes too, Holden. Big ones. Such as? Drake opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Such as assuming you're the only one who can play this game. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were photographs. Surveillance shots of me meeting with Colonel, entering the federal building, planting GPS trackers on Drake's vehicles. Industrial espionage, illegal surveillance, conspiracy to commit fraud. You've been so focused on destroying me that you've incriminated yourself in multiple federal crimes. I examined the photographs more closely. They were professionally taken, with timestamps and location data. Someone had been watching me for weeks. Who took these? Does it matter? What matters is that I have evidence of your criminal activities, evidence that will destroy your credibility with federal investigators. You're bluffing. Am I? Drake picked up his phone and dialed a number. Judge Trasker? It's Drake. I need you to issue arrest warrants for industrial espionage and conspiracy. Yes, tonight. Holden Ravell. I'll send over the evidence package now. He hung up and smiled at me with genuine warmth, as if we were old friends sharing a joke. You see, Holden, you made one critical error. You assumed Judge Trasker was just taking bribes. In reality, he's been my business partner for 15 years. Every decision, every ruling, every legal maneuver in this county goes through him first. My phone rang. Agent Hartline. Holden, we have a problem. Judge Trasker just issued federal arrest warrants for you on conspiracy charges. You need to turn yourself in immediately. I hung up and looked at Drake with new respect. Even cornered, even facing federal prosecution, he'd managed one final gambit. Impressive, but you're forgetting something important. Which is? I spent 20 years in defense intelligence. I know how to cover my tracks. I pulled out a second phone, one Drake didn't know about, and played another audio recording. This one featured Judge Trasker's voice discussing bribery payments and case fixing in explicit detail. Every conversation, every meeting, every criminal conspiracy, all recorded, all documented, all already in federal hands. Drake's smile faltered. Moreover, I continued, those arrest warrants you just had Trasker issue, they're based on falsified evidence, which makes them another federal crime, Conspiracy to obstruct justice carries a 20-year sentence. You're lying. Call Agent Hartline back. Ask her about the evidence package I delivered this afternoon. Ask her about the RICO charges being filed tomorrow morning. Ask her about the plea deal Calla just negotiated. Drake turned to look at his younger daughter, who couldn't meet his eyes. You testified against me? I'm sorry, Daddy. I was scared. They said I could go to prison for 20 years. You stupid little girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? She saved herself, I said, which is more than I can say for the rest of you. Ember finally spoke up. What about Nate? What happens to our son when all this comes out? Our son will be fine. He'll live with me in our house, which will be returned to my name once the fraudulent property transfer is reversed. He'll visit you wherever they send you, assuming you cooperate with federal investigators. And if I don't cooperate? Then he'll visit your grave instead of your prison cell. The room fell silent again. Outside, I could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. Drake stood slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. I have friends, connections, people who owe me favors. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Your friends can't help you now. Your connections are about to become liabilities, and the people who owe you favors are going to pretend they never met you. The sirens were louder now, definitely heading our way. That's the FBI, I said. They decided not to wait until tomorrow morning. Drake moved to the window and looked out at the driveway, where black SUVs were pulling up with their lights flashing. How long have you known? He asked without turning around. Known what? That Nate isn't your son. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the room spin slightly, my vision narrowing to a tunnel. What did you say? The boy was born 7 months after Ember's business trip to Denver, but he was full term, not premature. Do the math, Holden. I looked at Ember, who was staring at her hands. Is it true? She nodded without looking up. Asher's the father. I'm sorry. The FBI agents were at the front door now, their voices echoing through the marble foyer. In a few minutes, they'd be in this room, making arrests and reading rights, but all I could think about was the 7-year-old boy I'd raised as my son, who wasn't my son at all. Why? I managed to ask. Because I was young and stupid and thought I could have everything, Ember said. Because Asher was exciting and dangerous and you were safe. Safe. Boring. Predictable. Everything I thought I didn't want. The study door opened and Agent Hartline entered, followed by 6 federal agents in tactical gear. Drake Torrin, you're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Asher Trevan, you're under arrest for conspiracy and fraud. Ember Ravell, you're under arrest as a material witness. As they read the Miranda rights and applied handcuffs, I stood frozen in place, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 5 minutes. My wife was a criminal. My son wasn't my son. My entire life for the past 7 years had been built on lies. But Drake Torrin was going to federal prison. Judge Trasker was finished. Asher Trevan's career was over. The people who had systematically destroyed my life were facing justice. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the end of the world. Agent Hartline approached me as the others were led away in handcuffs. You okay, Holden? No, but I will be. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. Of course. And we'll need to discuss your custody situation. The boy? Nate is my son in every way that matters. DNA doesn't change that. She nodded approvingly. Good man. We'll make sure the court understands that. As the federal agents led the Torrin family away, I stood alone in Drake's study, surrounded by the wreckage of everything I'd thought I knew about my life. But I was still standing, battered, betrayed, and broken, but still standing. And sometimes that's enough. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my house, legally my house now, after the fraudulent property transfer had been reversed, making breakfast for Nate. He sat at the table working on homework, his dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that reminded me painfully of Asher Trevan. But when he looked up at me with those bright, curious eyes, all I saw was the little boy I'd raised from infancy, the boy who called me Dad, who trusted me completely, who had no idea his entire family had been built on lies. Dad, can you help me with this math problem? Sure, buddy. What are you working on? We bent over his worksheet together, and for a moment everything felt normal, like we were just a regular father and son dealing with regular problems. The federal trials had been a media circus. Drake received 15 years for fraud and conspiracy, effectively a permanent sentence given his medical condition. He lasted only 3 months in federal custody before the cancer took its course, passing away in a prison hospital bed with only his lawyer present. Judge Trasker got 20 years and disbarment. His corruption had tainted hundreds of cases, requiring a complete review of every ruling he'd made over the past decade. Asher Trevan received 10 years and complete financial ruin. His defense contracting business had been dissolved, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed. He'd be in his 50s when he got out, with no money and no prospects. Ember had cooperated with federal investigators and received 5 years probation in exchange for her testimony. She'd moved to California, supposedly to start over, but we both knew she was just running away from the consequences of her choices. Calla had received full immunity in exchange for her testimony. She'd disappeared entirely. New name, new city, new life, funded by witness protection. I hoped she'd learned something from the experience, but I wasn't optimistic. "Dad, are you okay?" I realized I'd been staring out the window, lost in thought. "I'm fine, Nate. Just thinking." "About Mom?" The question caught me off guard. We'd had this conversation before, but it never got easier. Sometimes. "Do you miss her?" He considered this seriously, the way 7-year-olds do when asked important questions. "A little, but she made you sad a lot, and she wasn't around very much anyway." "That's true." "Are you going to get married again?" "I don't know. Maybe someday." "Would that be okay with you?" "As long as she's nice to you, and as long as she likes baseball." I laughed despite myself. Those are good requirements. My phone buzzed with a text from Colonel. "New business opportunity. Defense contractor in Austin needs security consulting. Interested?" I'd been rebuilding my cybersecurity firm slowly, carefully, with legitimate clients and transparent business practices. The work was steady, if not spectacular, and it allowed me to be home when Nate got out of school. "Maybe," I texted back. "Send me the details." After Nate left for school, I sat in my home office reviewing financial statements and client contracts. The house was quiet in a way that had once felt lonely, but now felt peaceful. I'd learned to appreciate solitude over the past 6 months. No more family dinners filled with veiled insults. No more walking on eggshells around Ember's moods. No more pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The doorbell rang at noon. Through the peephole, I saw Agent Hartline standing on my porch, looking official in her dark suit and sunglasses. "Agent Hartline, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Just Tessa now. I'm off duty." She held up a bottle of wine. "Thought we might celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "The final conviction. Asher Trevan's appeal was denied this morning. Everyone's in prison where they belong." I invited her in and opened the wine while she made herself comfortable in the living room. "How are you holding up?" she asked as I handed her a glass. "Better than expected. Some days are harder than others, but we're managing." "And Nate?" "He's resilient. Kids adapt faster than adults." "What about the paternity issue?" I'd been dreading this question for months. "I'm adopting him officially. The paperwork should be finalized next month." "Even though he's not biologically yours?" "He's been my son for 7 years. Biology doesn't change that." Tessa smiled. "You're a good man, Holden Ravell. Better than most." "I'm a man who got played by experts and decided to play back. There's a difference." "Is there? You could have walked away, filed for divorce, started over somewhere else, left the whole mess behind. Instead, you chose to fight for justice. I chose to fight for revenge. Same thing in this case." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking wine and watching the afternoon light filter through the windows. "Any regrets?" Tessa asked eventually. I considered the question seriously. "About exposing the corruption? No. About the way my marriage ended? No. About Nate finding out the truth someday? Maybe. He'll understand when he's older. I hope so. What's next for you?" "I rebuild. My business, my reputation, my life. I raise my son and try to be a better man than the people who tried to destroy me." Sounds like a good plan. After Tessa left, I spent the rest of the afternoon working in my garden, something I'd never had time for during my marriage. There was something therapeutic about planting new growth in soil that had been neglected for too long. When Nate came home from school, he found me transplanting tomato seedlings in the backyard. "Can I help?" "Of course. Grab those gloves." We worked together in the warm afternoon sun, father and son building something new from the ruins of what came before. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad it's just us now." "Me too, buddy. Me too." As evening approached, I made dinner while Nate did his homework. Simple domestic routines that felt revolutionary after years of chaos and deception. Later, after Nate was asleep, I sat on the back porch with a glass of bourbon, looking up at the stars and thinking about the future. I'd won my war against the Torrin family, but victory had come at a price I was still calculating. I'd lost my wife, learned my son wasn't biologically mine, and discovered that everything I'd believed about my life was a carefully constructed lie. But I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd thought, that I could fight back when cornered, that justice, while imperfect, was still possible. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news about Drake. You got him good. Proud of you. Colonel. I smiled and typed back, thanks for everything. Anytime, brother. That's what friends are for. Friends. Real ones, not the fair weather variety I'd lost when my business collapsed. People who stood by you when things got difficult, who helped you fight your battles, who celebrated your victories and mourned your losses. I'd learned the difference over the past year. The house settled around me with small creaks and sighs, familiar sounds that spoke of home and permanence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something better from the ashes of what came before. But tonight, I was content to sit in the darkness and appreciate what I'd fought to preserve. My son, my home, my integrity, and my future. The chair had broken first, that night at Drake's dinner table, but I was still standing, and that was enough.